Have you ever watched two people fall for each other and thought, this feels like a bad idea, but also, I can't look away? Today, we're looking at Silver Linings Playbook and how it asks us to believe two people might create something tender in the middle of a train wreck. The movie follows Pat right as he's released from a psychiatric facility after a violent outburst connected to his ex-wife's infidelity. He moves back in with his parents and becomes fixated on winning Nikki back, even though that marriage is long gone. Tiffany enters the picture as a young widow with her own history of self-destruction, loss, and anger simmering just below the surface. When she offers to help Pat contact Nikki in exchange for joining her dance competition, their brittle paths collide. What unfolds is a blend of unpredictability, longing, hurt, and yearning that shouldn't function as romance, and yet somehow does. One of the strangest joys of watching this film is realizing how mismatched Pat and Tiffany appear on paper. He's clinging to the fantasy of a woman who doesn't want him. She's masking a hollow center with sharpness, sex, and bravado. Their first conversations feel like two cracked mirrors held up to each other, reflecting damage instead of possibility. Pat talks at a mile-a-minute pace, overflowing with unfiltered thoughts and plans that only make sense to him. Tiffany watches him with a kind of fascinated exhaustion, as if she's already read the ending and still chooses to stay for the whole story. They recognize the instability in each other because neither one is good at pretending things are better than they are. When they agree to train for the dance competition, it feels less like a wholesome project and more like two people finding a distraction from the pain they don't know how to process. There's comfort in that shared escape, but it comes at the cost of pushing their actual healing aside. That tension is what makes their dynamic feel both magnetic and worrisome. The argument that Tiffany manipulates Pat, especially with the fake Nikki letters, is one many fans can't shake. It's hard to deny the way she nudges him toward the competition, how she claims pieces of his attention that he doesn't fully realize he's giving. Whether she intended to trap him or simply acted from a place of fear is left ambiguous by the script. She's grieving a husband who died, trying to do something kind for her, and she carries that guilt like a stone. Yet her choices gain weight because Pat is still fragile. His grasp on reality, especially around Nikki, wobbles throughout the film. He wants so badly to believe he's making progress, that he's following the right signpost back to the future he imagines. Tiffany steps into that gap with the letters, not because she wants to mislead him, but because she's terrified the only person who sees her clearly might walk away. The dance becomes their shared language. It's structured, demanding, and forces them into routine, but it also isolates them, giving Tiffany access to a version of Pat that isn't distracted by the ghosts of his marriage. She reaches for him not with gentleness, but with insistence. His affection surfaces slowly, almost imperceptibly, until the moment he realizes his obsession with Nikki isn't giving him what Tiffany does: presence instead of memory. Whether this is healing or dependency is the uncomfortable question the movie leaves hanging in the air. One reason audiences continue to root for these two is that their messiness feels recognizable. Pat isn't a tragic caricature of mental illness. Tiffany isn't reduced to her impulsiveness. They aren't flattened into tropes. Their struggles look like the moments people hide, returning to old patterns, lashing out when overwhelmed, believing the wrong things because the truth hurts more. Pat's mood swings aren't framed as charming quirks, and Tiffany's volatility isn't romanticized as passion. They're treated as the real, unfiltered parts of who they are. The film doesn't scrub away their emotional debris, it sits with it. Even the supporting characters carry their own burdens: the father's superstitions and gambling, the mother's denial, the family friend's bottled up desperation. It's a world full of people who cope the best way they know how, even when those ways aren't healthy. There's something strangely comforting in that, not because dysfunction looks appealing, but because it mirrors the complicated way families and communities navigate each other's pain. Everyone is trying to hold their lives together through rituals, small habits, or misguided hope. The dance competition is where their relationship finally crystallizes. It's messy, awkward, and charmingly flawed. The routine resembles two people learning to trust each other one step at a time. The surrounding crowd watches with a mixture of confusion and pity, but Pat and Tiffany are locked in their own orbit. It's not graceful, yet it feels sincere. Their routine isn't a symbolic triumph, it's a moment of clarity. They're no longer hiding behind goals that no longer make sense. Tiffany stops pretending she's fine without him. Pat stops clinging to a fantasy he should have let go of months ago. And when he tells her he knew she wrote the letter, it lands like a sigh instead of an accusation. Instead of punishment, he offers understanding. The romance finally makes sense, not because they're meant for each other, but because they're finally honest with themselves. There's a reason this film lives at the intersection of dysfunctional romance and unlikely tenderness. Pat and Tiffany don't fix each other, and the movie never suggests that love is some magical solution. Instead, it hints at something smaller and more believable. Companionship can become a form of hope, not a cure, not salvation, but a signal that you are not alone while you figure yourself out. The boundary between support and dependency stays intentionally murky. That tension is what gives the movie its staying power. It lets viewers decide whether this is a love story built on questionable foundations or a portrait of two people who find growth in each other's company. The optimism at the end isn't polished. It carries the weight of everything that came before. And maybe that's why people root for Pat and Tiffany. Their connection isn't glamorous or stable. It's unpredictable, fragile, and bruised. It makes sense only if you understand how two people who feel unlovable might find comfort in each other's presence. Silver Linings Playbook thrives because it embraces the complexity of relationships that form out of pain rather than perfection. Pat and Tiffany step toward each other not because it's wise or safe, but because it feels real in a way nothing else does. Their flaws don't vanish, their struggles don't magically end, they simply choose to move forward together, holding on to a bond that doesn't promise ease, but does offer a sense of being seen. This is Ladies First, watching women in movies. Here we empower women by reviewing and discussing films that highlight their stories, struggles, and achievements. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.